Hello, everyone. My name is Mark L. Vincent, and I am the director for the Convene Consulting Network. As such, I'm privileged to have conversations with people like Mike Petty, who we're going to talk with for a bit today. Dr. Mike Petty has an extensive career and has helped many organizations inside and from B-side. He's also instructed and helped many people with their academic careers as they studied business and being better as business leaders. He's also a Convene team chair in the Washington, D.C. area, and I'm privileged to meet with Mike a couple times a month. So I've gotten to know his heart and how he cares for his team and how he cares about the work of helping people have excellent businesses and honor God. So Mike, I want to welcome you and thank you for giving me a few minutes to have this conversation. I think folks are going to find very helpful.
Well, thank you, Mark. I couldn't have written a better introduction myself.
Well, it's nice when you actually know the people you get to have conversation with, because then it can be a real sincere, hey, this is somebody I know and trust. And that's truly the case with you. One of the things that we all really respect you for is your background and kind of some groundbreaking stuff you've been doing around futures thinking. And you've had a chance to work with a variety of organizations around that. So there's just a number of questions I'd like to ask you as we work through this. And to start, really, futures thinking is still an unfamiliar term for some. And in fact, the word prognostication might, even though that's a big word, might be a word they're even more familiar with. So it's just a little bit out there in some cases. So it probably would be useful if you would to give us a definition and make a distinction, because I know there is one, between like forecasting or strategic planning or even foresight. So give us that primer on future thinking.
Yeah, I think the best way to define futures thinking is with an illustration.
Okay.
Jeff Bezos of Amazon fame and one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest man in the world, likes to say, my senior team and I live and work in the future. And futures thinking methodology allows all organizations to live and work in the future, allows them to get ahead of change and to maximize competitive advantage, maximize opportunities, and minimize risks. So, with respect to a comparison to strategic planning, historically, I think the customary strategic plan that we have all probably seen and been involved in is typically an exercise of, what's our vision, what's our mission, what are the 3 or 4 to 6 initiatives we can develop over the next 3 years, and what does that look like on a financial forecast? And that particular approach to strategic planning, which I truly believe is really not strategic, it's more multi-year operational planning, was developed in the 1970s. And in an era where change didn't happen so fast, and change from outside of your industry rarely affected you. That's not the case today. Change happens so fast that if you're not paying attention to what's happening, not only outside of your business, but outside of your industry, you could be blindsided in finding yourself backpedaling, trying to catch up.
Yeah. I've heard someone say yesterday, now imagine if it was 2015 and you were doing a 5-year plan for 2020, like, would you have written the plan that you're in right now?
No.
Right.
In fact, a problem with plans, I mean, you've been there, Mark. We put in a lot of time and effort into a 3-year plan. We put it in a 3-ring binder. We read it one time, we put it on the shelf, and the next time it's taken off the shelf is the next time we have to do a 3-year plan. So it's not used as a working document. And so I think the emphasis here on strategic or on futures thinking is the thinking part. We don't use a lot of Excel spreadsheets. You can't get strategic thoughts out of your NetSuite platform. It really requires some serious thinking and maybe some different approaches to thinking.
It's really interesting because you talked about time frames. So the Amazon example, they're living in the future and reaching back to the now to pull forward, whereas the strategic stuff, maybe even a little bit of foresight, is standing here in the now and trying to project out, but with what you already kind of have. You're not constructing the future. Then you're trying to,
Yeah,
as you said,
e-
carry
e-
the.
exactly. We're starting from a point of historical data,
Mhm.
and we're forecasting out, assuming that the future is going to be the same as it is today.
Yeah.
You know, and as we can see, like you said in your example, 5 years out, if we did a 5 year plan, 5 years out is a moving target.
Mhm.
So what you plan today may be totally irrelevant
Right.
in 3 years, 5 years, even 1 year.
Well, I'd like to push on the timeframes part of that then just a little bit more because um, there was, let's say it this way, there was a short-termism that really showed up in 2008 and 9. What are we doing this quarter? What are we doing this month? In fact, let's even mess with the reports a little bit so we can look more profitable right now. The share price can go up and then we'll sell. So it's just very, very short term. That seems to not be in vogue the way it was. And yet we're in a right now mentality, maybe because of COVID and the pandemic and a great deal of uncertainty. But there's a lot of this. Um, this would be a luxury to actually engage in futures thinking. And when I have time and when I have money and everything is running really smoothly, maybe then we could do some of that kind of luxurious activity that helps us, dream forward. So what's the response to that?
Well, a couple of responses is you're right. Right now, we have to be thinking operationally, day to day, month to month. But right now isn't going to last forever. Right now, as we're facing it right now, may not last even till the end of this year. So yes, we have to do that. And in the everyday running of your business, put the coronavirus aside. On the everyday running of your business, you got to deal with everyday problems, right? The and I'll say that futures thinking really isn't a luxury. It's an underappreciated necessity,
Hmm.
because when you look at the statistics and you see that um, the 50% of all new businesses go out of business within 5 years, and 90% of them or more go out of business in 10, and that today the 10-year in the Fortune 500 is only 12 years and dropping. Um,
Right.
if you're not thinking about the future and staying ahead of change, you're going to be one of those statistics.
Yeah. Now you're making me think that maybe there's a correlation between that and short CEO tenures. Like, they're only in it for 2 or 3 years, if that, in many cases.
Well, they
You know.
can't be held accountable then for their poor.
Yeah, right. So, what are some of the other objections that you see, Mike, that get in the way of futures thinking?
Well, I think the biggest objection is a lack of urgency. As you pointed out, historically, not only since 2008, but going back my entire career back into the 1970s, there's always a short-term orientation, and it's driven by the publicly traded companies, and it's driven by the accounting systems are developed. We look at quarter to month to month, quarter to quarter, year to year, um, and I think there's just a lack of an understanding that we have to look beyond that. We have to get out of our short-term mentality. I think that's the biggest obstacle, is the lack of urgency.
Hmm.
Another obstacle really is the internal focus of organizations, and that one of the convene's objectives is to get executives to think on their business, not in their business.
Right.
And so thinking with a future perspective certainly gets them out of their business. So as we struggle to get our convene members to be focused outside, that's one of the issues. There's still that internal focus. And I think the last one is that this objective of a lack of time.
Hmm.
I think that's a misconception. I think refocusing on the future requires more intentionality than it does intensity of time. So I think those are the big three or four,
Yeah.
including the one.
In relationship to that last one, Mike, would you suggest that maybe there's even a new efficiency of time, or we could say less time wasting over time by engaging in futures thinking?
I think when you incorporate a future focused mentality and incorporate the minimum management system that drives that, you're not spending any more time than you have, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're just going to allocate some of the time that you might spend working on last year's problems, the
Mm-hmm.
stuff of yesterday, when you now are working on the stuff of tomorrow. So I'm not sure if I answered that question properly.
I think you did. So let me, just because I think this could be a fine point and maybe a good point to make. Today, I heard on the news radio broadcast about flight attendants who are picketing and saying, save our jobs. Now, indeed, their jobs are threatened deeply, right? The effort to be in the present saying, save my job now, given the data that's out there that it's already significantly threatened, is a choice for a use of time, trying to preserve what you have. Applying what you're talking about, and we'll get into this a bit more in a minute, but futures thinking, you're casting out to look at what could be reality. You might be choosing a very different strategy and already be further down the road than the person who is still hoping that there'll be some kind of glorified welfare program for them.
Yeah, I think, when I look back over the last 30 years, you can see this mentality, going back into the 70s and 80s when the auto industry, which I spent 20 years in.
That'd be a great example.
We're implementing robotics. So you have the union on one side saving,
Yeah.
we want to save our $80 an hour jobs. The flip side of that is the auto companies need to manufacture cost efficient methods to keep the cost of cars reasonable. And you might remember in the early 80s the concept of sticker shock. Cars went from an average price of $18,000, $20,000 a car to $30,000 a car in a matter of a year or two.
Mm-hmm.
So as we evolve using technologies, and we could talk about that right now, when we can use artificial intelligence to review legal documents, how many attorneys or paralegals is that going to put out of business?
Yeah. Oh my, yeah, right.
Yeah, and we're going to have more accurate documents.
Yeah, yeah.
So you can go at one example after another and be shocked. I'll give you kind of an example. One of our convene members in Chicago runs a plumbing company, and they do big plumbing projects. And he was telling me that at one point in time, they would be putting in lawn sprinkling systems. So they would get a call, come out and give us a proposal. They go out, they give them a proposal, and they'd have to come back, write up the proposal, send it out. They'd be waiting, and they may or may not get the job. He said we wasted a lot of time because we sent an engineer out there, somebody that could do the proposal, and we waited, and we didn't get a close. He said we used a free chat bot. We put it on our website, and it said, if you want a proposal for your sprinkling system, fill out this questionnaire and we'll get a proposal to you. He said, so people would call, somebody's thinking about doing their lawn at 11 o'clock at night, and they'd fill out the questionnaire. And by the time they got up the next morning, the proposal was there. He said, we didn't have to send anybody out. And if the potential customer thought the proposal was too high, it was too high. If they thought it was good, then we'd go out. We start negotiating. So he
Mm-hmm.
said, we saved man hours, tons of man hours. So now, did that eliminate some jobs? Maybe, maybe not. But I think the objective, I mean, as we talk about artificial intelligence and all of these different things for the future, we're going to be eliminating a lot of jobs. I think a lot of jobs will be eliminated. A lot of mundane jobs or standardized jobs, but it'll provide opportunities in other areas. So we have to be prepared for that. It's not something new. It's been going on for
and Mike, those are great examples, and it goes to your point of how rapidly businesses go out of business.
Mm-hmm.
And they get stuck in a method, they get stuck in a modality, and then things pass them by, and it might be price point, it might be other competition that they didn't take into account, and now they're done. So maybe some jobs have to change, but the company remains in business as opposed to gone.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So could you walk us through the methodology of futures thinking, just so folks get a better handle on how this actually works?
Sure. Organizations can develop a futures thinking orientation by really creating a structured process. And we use one, we call it the 5 practices of future focused leadership, because focusing on the future is a leadership issue. So that's how we start. So it's a five-step process. The first process is really challenge your current business model. Look for the strengths of your business model, look for your weaknesses, look for the changes that are impacting you right now, and take the action to improve your operations, improve your profitability, and minimize your risk. Okay. So futures thinking, you don't have to wait 10 years to figure out whether your futures thinking is working or not. You should be able to get immediate benefit out of the first step of futures thinking. And so, we have to start with today. So what do we have? We have our business model today. That's where we start, and we move forward from that. The second step, the second practice is really looking inside and outside of your industry of the what I call tectonic changes, those slow-moving changes that are going to impact you over time. That could be technological, could be demographic, could be political, legal. These are things that are going to slowly change over time. We don't see the impact, but like the tectonic plates, all of a sudden we have a volcano or an earthquake, and now we're struggling with our business model. So we go through this process of looking at these longer term trends, and we try to identify 2 or more significant drivers of change, as we call them, drivers of change. So we identify that. The third phase is actually creating scenarios based on these drivers of change. And we have a process, we call it a scenario matrix, where we take the 2 drivers and say, with 2 drivers, you're going to have 4 different scenarios. There's going to be some on the low end, it's going to be these drivers aren't really going to affect us very much. On the high end, the drivers are going to affect us a lot. When you create these scenarios, now you get to the point where Jeff Bezos is. He's looking at the future. You got the future in front of you. And so you can start from there. Once you have those scenarios, you can start looking backwards. And one of my favorite quotes by Steve Jobs is that you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking back. So creating the scenarios allows you the opportunity, whether it's 3, 5, 10 years out in the future, say, gee, you know what? I really don't like this. I don't really like this scenario. So what do we have to do about it? Once you have the scenarios created, you can start looking for what we call inflection points. Those are those evidence of change that says, boy, I think this is happening. When you see a plumbing contractor putting a chatbot on his website, you might say, hey, if he can do it, I can do it. And if he can do it, everybody's going to be doing that. So it's evidence of change. The fourth step, the fourth practice is where the rubber meets the road here. So we take our scenarios and we say, okay, based on these scenarios, we want to develop 3 transition paths. And I'm using paths rather than plans, because paths give us some flexibility. is we don't know which of the 4 scenarios we're going to end up in, right?
Right.
They're going to evolve. But having a path that kind of considers all 4 of them allows us to have some flexibility. So when we're watching for the inflection points, we can then create these paths and then solidify the paths so we can move forward. So the 3 paths are, the first path is really enhance your existing business model. Take what you know based on the scenario planning and say, what do we have to do with our business model right now to make it more efficient, more profitable? Path number 1. Path number 2 is, over time, how do we create an alternative business model? So if we see the future evolving, we can say, our business model is A, but based on what we know, we have to make a change. So I'll give you kind of an example, convenient example. Historically, our business model has revolved around the forum day. We have forum day, and then we have one-on-one coaching. Maybe as we evolve, we based on the evidence we see in the marketplace, like millennials really like to be coached, we might find that the business model of the future, 5 years from now or so, might be that the coaching becomes the primary driver of Convene's business model, and the forum day becomes a secondary thing. So that's just an example that we can relate to. The third path is really watching what changes in the marketplace to create a new and adjacent business. So, and you can use the Amazon example. Amazon started selling books, a simple product, only books on the internet. But over the last 20 years, because technology has expanded, one of Amazon's most profitable businesses is their Amazon Web Services. Totally unrelated on the surface to selling books and selling retail, but using their underlying technology to provide services to other companies. So it's the 3R is, again, to summarize it, it's creating or enhancing your current business model, and the time frame is 1 to 3 years, and the sooner the better. The second one is creating a new business model, and I'd say the time horizon is 1 to 5 years, and the sooner the better. And then the last one is creating an adjacent business, a new adjacent business that grows revenue in addition to what you're doing. I'm not saying get rid of the old business, but add on new business. That might be a 1 to 5 to 10 year, but the sooner you can wrap your arms around that, the better too. Mm-hmm. So that's the fourth aspect of future focused leadership. And the fifth one is really future focused leadership. And that's the ongoing daily activity or periodic activity of intentionally looking for change in your industry and outside your industry. You've already identified some of that because of the work you've already done, what changes you should look for, making adjustments to your business models on an ongoing basis, and actually assigning accountabilities to senior managers for following that stuff up. I mean, futures thinking is a team effort. So, and then it all sums up with an annual review, just like you would do an annual review of your budget. Do the annual review of your future so that you can make those course corrections that you need as you see the various scenarios developing. So what this does, this allows organizations to improve their current profitability, take advantage of longer term opportunities, identify and minimize longer term risk, and really ultimately what we want to do is we want to create value, right? So
you've described here something that you embed inside the organization as an ongoing set of activities, rather almost like a governing kind of thing, rather than, oh, hey, for our staff retreat this year, let's do futures thinking. Now we've done that. What's next? Like a consumer experience.
You're absolutely right. You might have to do that retreat to get the ball rolling, because you're introducing a lot of new concepts and whatever, but it really is a cultural thing. This shouldn't be just a an exercise for the senior management team. It should be an exercise for everybody. You know, sometimes it's the customer service rep that's closer to the client that sees the change that's happening.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. And if I'm getting the message, then it's like, if we think, oh, let's do that every 5 years, we might not be here in 5 years
yeah,
to do it again, because we wouldn't have engaged the future. We wouldn't have followed up on what kind of business are we in? Will we be in? What do we need to add on? And so forth.
yep, exactly.
So as we wrap up today, Mike, can you give us an example of an entity that you've worked with where they needed to get some futures thinking done? They did get it embedded. They're experiencing some benefits now. Just to give us a sense of what that picture could look like.
Sure. I mean, I'll give you one that's close to our hearts, and that's Convene itself. Convene is 20-something years old, but their business model hasn't significantly changed in those 20 years. And we know that there are drivers of change that are going to be impacting that. So one of the drivers is demographic shifts. You know, basically most of our chairs are baby boomers. A lot of our members are baby boomers. In 10 years, you and I might not be doing this interview. Another change is advancing technologies. You've been in Convene long enough to know that we use a lot of paper, right? Mm-hmm. And there are other ways, like we've discovered right now, using technology that we can do things much more efficiently. So Convene asked the question, the Convene leadership asked the question, will our business model be relevant in 2030? Will it help us satisfy our mission in 2030? So they elected to go through the 5 practices that I just outlined. So we started fourth quarter of last year, and we worked our way through the first 3 practices to the point where we've created the scenarios just before the first week of March, just before coronavirus hit. And I think it was the 14th or 15th of March when the president shut everything down. Convene was able, based on the work we had already done, they were able to pivot within 2 days and go from face-to-face forum days to virtual forum days, face-to-face one-to-ones, virtual one-to-ones. We also did virtual ICS meetings, right? So they were able to, and in the process of doing these first 3 practices, we were able to identify an underserved market that maybe with the use of technology we can start serving and generating a whole new set of Convene members. So they were able to get immediate benefit. They went through this coronavirus thing really without much of a hiccup, some discomfort as we went through the process. And as a result of that work, there is a team already working on what does the enhanced business model look like. Mm-hmm. So that might be driving more virtual teams. It might be driving a different way of even doing forum days, rather than all-day forum day, to something else. So we've in a very short period of time, we got some immediate benefit. Convene got some immediate benefit out of this. Now the transition plan 2, creating a new business model, we put it together a team to work on that, a team of chairs, and then the transition 3 is looking at adjacent businesses. We haven't started that yet, but we will be probably, once we get through with these other 2 transitions, we'll be looking at what are the core competencies of Convene on which we can create a brand new adjacent business. So
as you walked through that, you've reminded me that I know 2 companies that when the state shut down around coronavirus and it's declared a pandemic, they went to the shelf, pulled off the shelf the pandemic plan, and followed it, got through it, were able to pivot because it actually engaged in futures thinking. Exactly. And they had their scenarios outlined. One company had done it because it made sense. Another company did it because it was required of them. It's the kind of business that they're in. But that kind of work literally saved their skin. So it's just another example of how critical and important this can be.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, this is a chance then, Mike, just to say thank you for the conversation. I think people are going to find this useful. And thank you for joining me today.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. This was fun.
All right. So we're going to say farewell here. Mike's contact information will be up on the screen as we close. He'll be happy to hear from you and converse with you if this is something you'd like to dig into even more. So farewell for now. Bye-bye.
Take care.